Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and all this clutter that you see here is something that we hinted at the last time we checked in on my VermiBag Tote. In my VermiBag Tote, I'm running a mixed combination of worm types. It's 3 different types of worms. There's blue worms in here, there's red wigglers, and there's European night crawlers. The label even indicates the types of worms that are in here. And you can see that this system was started back in November, the 10th of November. But if we slip over to here, take a look at the date that's on this sticker over here. It's the same date. This is where the castings ended up. So when the time came to move these worms out of their previous environment into this bag 79 days ago, I held on to their castings, and their castings were presumed to have cocoons in them. So that's the reason I've been hanging on to this. 79 days, you know, it's been a while. I was worried that maybe the cocoons were not progressing, so I put them onto this heating rack over here. The only thing that makes this into a heating rack is the fact that there's some Christmas lights burning underneath this little system I've got here. So this is attempting to keep a number of systems warm so that cocoons hatch. It's my cocoon hatchery nursery setup over there. So besides this bin getting launched 79 days ago and its cocoons being set aside as a nursery 79 days ago, the one day prior to all that happening, 80 days ago, was when I pulled worms out of the previous environment, knowing that they were all pulled together into one spot, getting them ready to be relocated. I pulled a few volunteers out, and I used those volunteers to start off a time-lapse. So this is my time-lapse rig here. You can see the camera is still mounted up. I've got my power screwdriver. I'm going to start disassembling this thing. Luckily, the container that the worms are in comes off quite easily, so I'll just pop that off. And I'm going to take out the collected baby worms that have accumulated in here in the little baiting area that we had set up for them. And at this point, the time lapse is over. This cocoon nursery of this mixed combination of worms is over. So I'm going to be pulling all the worms out of these 2 systems and reuniting them with the main population over here in the VermiBag Tote. So I'm going to put on a glove, and we're going to get to work. I got to admit, I debated on whether I wanted to roll the camera for this, because I guess there does run a certain risk of a huge mess occurring here. But I guess since there is this backing of cellophane that I wanted to have between the worm environment and the wood, it feels like we could just use this cellophane wrap to sort of contain what could potentially become a big mess. And just almost kind of wrap the whole thing up before we proceed with popping it off, the backing. So as you can see, this cellophane comes off pretty easily. It's just saran wrap type cellophane wrap. And if we just keep all these chunks of tape on here, we can just sort of flip them around and use them to keep everything in here. Although I've got this feeling that this is going to be a pretty smooth removal. I don't think it's going to try to stick to the cellophane tape, so we'll be able to better see what the deal is here after we remove it. So that's an interesting view of the back, which you never really get to see. I thought there might be a few worms kind of hanging out over here. But I gotta say, that came off quite nice and easy. This thing has not been fed in quite some time. Day 59 was the last time I put any food in here. And now we're at day 80 since this thing was launched. So that means over 30 days that this thing has been without food or moisture or anything. That's the reason I had a couple pieces of Ziploc bag just sitting on the top, trying to hold whatever moisture was in the system in there, not let it escape too much. So I'm kind of hoping that it all stays intact there. I don't want it to come flowing out. That would not be too good. Perhaps if we did it the other way, this way there's at least the cellophane there to hold it in place, right? Alright, we'll put this aside until the time comes to release the contents of this into the VermiBag Tote. So let's get this thing out of the way. Now, the last time we checked in on my cocoon nurseries, we checked in on all 3 of them. And at that time, we pulled worms out of all 3 of them. And to try to see if we could round up a few more, we kind of reset the bait. I think we had set up some bait, so I think you could see it here already. It blends in nicely, but you could tell that there's something there. It's the couple chunks of banana peel that was put there to possibly lure out a few extra worms, if there's any left. We did one haul out 11 days ago, last time we checked in here. And I think even at that point we sort of knew that we were going to bring the system to an end soon. Primarily just because of its age. So we're going to see to that today. We're going to retire this. I've already plugged up the big opening on the cocoon nursery heating rack or warming rack or whatever you want to call it. Where'd that worm go? Okay. He's kind of blending in on the lower corner there. I thought he snuck away. So, I don't know. I think what we've got over here on the banana is springtails and a potworm. I don't think we've got any blues or red wigglers or euros on here. All we've got are some worm bin helpers. But whatever, I'm going to be extracting this piece of food as well. There's no sense in leaving a chunk of half-eaten banana peel in a batch of finished castings at this point. So yeah, 79 days. It's quite a long time. I think it's well beyond what's needed for cocoons to hatch and for you to be able to round up the worms. So here too, I just saw a little, fairly small little worm. So far we've got 2. And I don't know, it's so hard to tell. It's so tiny. Oops, where did he go? I don't even know if I'm going to be able to find that little guy again. It somehow didn't appear to be a potworm. It looked like it could have been a tiny, tiny baby worm. And it would be a shame to have to leave this little guy behind, but maybe someday when he's bigger we'll have better luck rounding him up. I definitely saw something squirming around and it looked more pink than white. So I thought it might be a baby worm that we could scoop out of here and reunite with the rest of the family. But you know what? As long as we're looking around, we might as well examine all of this more damp material that's out here on the surface. See, like here too. If you just look at the size of this worm, it just appears to be way too large. I don't even know if it's going to show on the camera. It's on the tip of my index finger. It's moving around quite a bit, so it should be easy enough to see. It just looks much larger than any potworm I remember ever seeing. And I think that baby worms actually do emerge without a great deal of color, and they gradually get more pink as they age. So I got a feeling we've just got ourselves a little baby worm there, so I figured bring them along for the ride. There might not be a whole lot else in here for us to retrieve and relocate. I think all we've really got left in here is a batch of nice finished castings, more or less finished castings. I've been trying to sort of adjust my parameters a little bit for what I consider to be finished castings. And this is obviously full of finished castings, but it's also full of extra other things, you know. Maybe some of this is just clumped together castings, but other things like this are clearly a little chunk of leftover food or bedding or something that remains in here from back when this system was still composting. At some point, if I really needed this stuff to be super fine, beautiful castings only, I could just sift it through quickly, separate all these larger chunk materials that are clearly not castings. It's another little squirmer, might be a potworm, might be a regular worm. Still very young, but whatever. We'll just throw them in here. So this little guy, I've already added some extra stuff here that he can hide under if he's really panicking. Let's get him over by the pile of junk, so that when I toss these few items over into our VermiBag Tote, we'll know that we didn't leave anyone behind. And, you know, chances are we probably will be leaving a worm or two behind, but, you know, there's a good amount of moisture in here. I'll be putting this into a bucket, putting it into storage. It'll be prevented from drying out too much. And if there's any worms left behind, they'll be okay in this stuff. At some point it'll be used out in the garden, spread out to feed the plants. But we're still in the thick of winter, and for now this stuff is just going to go into storage for a little while. But I think the time has come to get the VermiBag Tote out here and have ourselves a little family reunion. How does that sound? Oh wait, you know what? Let's get this thing covered up here, right? We didn't want to lose any moisture. Preserve what we've got. In fact, I think it was this way to make sure it better covers things. And then that bottom portion can dry a little bit. It won't be the end of the world. I'm just thinking about any straggler worms that might still be in there. Don't want this to dry out excessively. So, all right, onto the VermiBag Tote. Okay, now it's been, how long has it been? It's been 10 days since we last checked in, at which time it received its 9th feeding. And whether or not it needs food today, I'm not sure. So my idea was to do a quick inspection of the system before we start introducing the extra head count. This way we'll be able to gauge whether or not food is needed. And maybe we can plop that in before we release the worms from the other 2 systems that we just decommissioned. What I'm not really liking are all these little flying insects. I've got tons of worm bins. Well, not tons, but I've got a number of worm bins, but this is one of the only ones where I see this sort of flying insect activity. Sometimes I wonder if it's just got to do with the fact that the system has the zip top, you know. Gives them a nice little place to hide. Maybe I should just leave the zip top off and cover with plastic like I do in most of my other systems and see if the flying insect situation subsides. So yeah, there's flying insects all hanging out. I can see them kind of glistening as their wings reflect some light. All these tracks, these look like worm tracks. I think the worms are coming up for all this moisture that drops down here onto the cardboard after it hits that plastic that we just removed. There's a good amount of moisture down here too on this paper towel. I think what we'll do is we're going to just kind of get these out of our way. I think we had talked about how this system was sort of getting recluttered because we had worked on trying to reduce some of the excessive coverings that were in this thing, and then next thing you know we got right into adding a whole bunch of extra coverings here. So not only do we have cardboard coverings and paper towel coverings, we've now also got not just 1 but 2 coffee filter coverings. We've got no shortage of coverings here in this bin, that's for sure. It is kind of cool how there's like little pockets of moisture collecting in each. Here too, I could see all kinds of little damp pockets. And I think the worms also kind of like squirming in between layers of stuff. I mean, I don't have any sort of a special feeding pattern going on here, but it almost seems like a lasagna layer feeding bin, right? I've got another of my bins where I'm feeding in this layered fashion where you refer to it as a lasagna feeding style because you got layers of cardboard and paper and then different things in between. So we finally exposed the bin and its contents. So the question that remains here before we start piling in the extra worms is whether or not the feeding they got a few days ago, 10 days ago, still has a good number of leftovers or not. I'm already bumping into some stuff that looks like leftovers. My idea was that if we don't need to feed today, we won't, even though I do have some coffee piling up upstairs in the kitchen. Maybe it would be nice if I could just at least get rid of those few days worth of coffee. Throw that into here, and then we could consider this bin as having received its 10th feeding today as well. And then we can kind of forget about it for a little while. It's just that when I get down in here, there are good bits of leftover, here we go, banana peel. There's other things in here too. I think this might have been chunks of bread. I had some pizza crust that I threw in here. It's getting moldy. That's what kind of tipped it off. Yeah, this is all bread. I got a feeling the mold is going to take a good chunk out of it before the worms move in. My only real observation about the stuff down here in this feeding zone is that it feels a little bit dry. But I am starting to sense that we've probably got a good number of leftovers in here, meaning we don't need to add food today. There's coffee. I'm bumping into coffee. Here's some more paper towel. Probably more of a bedding type material. Here's some more banana peel. Here's some more bread. But I think that the consistent theme I'm noticing when I'm checking all this stuff out is that it could probably benefit a lot from a good moistening. Yeah, we're going to do just that. I'm just kind of breaking it all up so I can get a better sense of where the worms are. They're in various locations and enjoying different things. It also gives me a little chance to see how certain things are breaking down. Here's kind of like the end of a piece of vegetable. This little guy is sort of burrowing through the fibers of the thing. Yeah, I think a good dampening here is going to help a lot. So we'll kind of just restore these food items and bedding bits that we pulled out of the feeding area, and at the same time we'll dampen everything down nicely. I guess we're going to be fluffing things up here a little bit too, which means maybe we won't have a whole lot of room left after we get done doing this. I just hope we have room enough to fit everything that we want to get in here. There's certainly not going to be any sort of a major release when it comes to what we got out of the nursery. So I think we might as well just get that in here. Then at some point at the end, once we've got a kind of a level top over here, I think we'll empty the time-lapse container. I'm still sort of assembling all this leftover food that I'm finding. It's a little bit of a pile here. I feel like I must have put some pretty dry bedding bits, cardboard paper. Maybe even the coffee that I put in here might have been dry when I put it in here, and a lot of it must have just sucked up moisture. So I think it's a good thing that we're checking in here, because applying a little bit of moisture to this feeding zone is crucial at this point if we want to see composting activity continue. Let me go get my water bottle. Alright, so I got my spray bottle. I'm all set to moisten stuff up here, but I've also rinsed off my glove, so I'm not going to miss this opportunity to show off my little illustration. Yeah, I made an illustration. I was having a hard time getting my button gear earlier, and I thought to myself, you know, if at least somehow I articulated what my plan was and I knew what I was after and I could stay focused, maybe even do it in a way that provides a little bit of interesting visual aid, then let's do it. I drew it up just to show how this was where the worms started out, and then 80 days ago was when I pulled out a few of them to start off my time lapse, and I think it's been 31 days now since that population received any fresh foods. It's been a while. And then there was the cocoon nursery, which over the past 36 days has been on that warming rack, but you know, previous to that it was, you know, just out in the cold, possibly hindering its progress. And that's that 11 days I might have mentioned earlier about the last check-in on the cocoon nurseries. And it leads us to here, the VermiBag Tote. Again, same age, 79 days, 10 days since it was last fed, at which point it received its 9th feeding, and some other bits and pieces of information, including some of the crazy names I've got from my bins. But yeah, let's get to reconstructing this feeding area with an ample bit of moisture. It does seem like these longer walls of the bag have this tendency to really, I don't know, release a good bit of moisture through them. So I guess I'm going to go a little bit generous on this moisture here, with the assumption that it might just continue to leach out through the material and dry. So I'm not skimping. I think we'll just add moisture throughout the bin. We'll just we'll check the other bits of the bin too to make sure they're okay. If they need moisture, we'll give it. So we've got chunks of veggie, pieces of banana peel, moldy bread, plenty of food to go for a little while, I think, before we need to throw food in here. I've just been finding that a lot of my systems have slowed down a little bit now that we're in the middle of winter. Just the cooler temperatures down here in my wormery are probably contributing to sort of slowed down activity of the worms. So I definitely added a good bit of moisture there. I'm wondering how see, as soon as I check these outer edges, everything feels fine. Everything actually feels very good over there. Seems like the worms had no interest in hanging out where the food was since it was just too dry over there. They came over here where it's nice and damp. Somehow these far ends of the container somehow sit up more closely to the plastic tub itself, not allowing for any airflow to get between. And over there the moisture is holding up just fine. I don't think I even need to add any moisture over there. I don't want to swamp the bin or, dampen unnecessarily. But in the middle, it was definitely needed. I mean, they're not going to be able to do anything with that food if the stuff is just sitting there bone dry. So let's see how things are over on this side. Yeah, same thing. I guess just these outer edges. Over here, we've got a good bit of dry material. I guess we could always just sort of blend it in with some of the surrounding more damp material, but if it's going to dry over there on this edge against this wall, as well as this wall back here, then you might as well just anticipate the ongoing drying and dampen it adequately. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. It's so unusual to be adding so much moisture. I never do that. Just that with this the heat running constantly since we're in the middle of January here. It's pretty much freezing. We got a storm coming in tonight. A bunch of snow expected. So the temperatures are already dropping. I think there's going to be a lot of wind too, and the wind also pushes a lot of cold air down into my breezy basement, my drafty, chilly basement. So yeah, I think we've done a really nice job dampening this system up so that there's no nasty dry middle area. And yeah, these two larger walls, with the food right there in the middle, I guess it just had sort of a perfect storm between the drying of the bin in general because of the dry winter air, not to mention I think a good bit of dry bedding and coffee and other things put in there last time. It just created a far too dry feeding area that didn't really produce much activity. So we got plenty of leftovers here. Let this bin go for a little while longer. Hopefully things stay damp enough in here so that, it doesn't start slowing down again as far as worm composting is concerned. But I think it's time to go get that other container that was in the time lapse and let those little guys loose. I guess I'll just bring this back so we can put the plastic somewhere. Luckily, this whole thing seems to hold up quite nicely. I think even without the plastic here, it should pretty much stay intact, hopefully. This is like a piece of leftover watermelon skin. The time lapse is pretty much done. It's even up on YouTube already. I've already added all the end screens and comments and all that other fun stuff, so it's pretty much ready for prime time. I just need to pull the trigger and make it public, so it's going to be coming up soon, that's for sure. Alright, very cool. Let's get this stuff out of our way. And this will be our last chance to check out this crazy container. So all it is just a thing that mounts up on the wall on these holes, the same way it was mounted up on the backing board, and it's just meant to hold paper, like files. So I wonder how this thing's going to come out. Are we going to have to scrape it out, or is it going to eject out nicely? We've got some leftovers here, but certainly not much. These are what's left of some watermelon. And then this is what's left of some pumpkin. And then I guess the only other thing remaining is what remains of the cucumber. A little bit of bedding here on top too, just some crushed leaves, but I think the time has come to bring these guys back to where they came from, where I recruited them from originally, and see what's going to be involved with getting the contents of this to come out nicely. Oh, yeah, it looks like it's coming out pretty completely. Very nice. Okay, so there was a video showing me collecting these worms to recruit them for this project, but I didn't want to continue on with that release video. I did the release of the worms offline without a video, other than the time-lapse itself. This is pretty nice bunch of worms hanging out here all throughout the material. Lots of what appears to be baby worms in here too, surprisingly. So it does seem like they were pretty comfortable in this environment. It didn't seem like a very big space for them to live in, but it seems like they made the best of it. I guess we'll scrape out whatever we can, or at least enough to make sure we haven't left any worms behind. Okay, I think that's pretty much everything, right? The question is it everyone? I think it is everyone. I don't think we missed anybody. That's good. All right, I'm gonna let these little guys get situated for a minute or two, and I think we're pretty much done here. Okay, well, I can see there's still a couple worms out here on the surface, but I think the time has come to cover things up here again and let this whole system get back to work. There's luckily a bunch of leftovers here, and I think that the worms coming out of the time-lapse container are probably itching for a nice fresh meal, so they'll be happy to get down into that nice freshly dampened portion of food down the middle. So we'll just indicate to ourselves where we have that food with these 2 coffee filters. And we'll just start returning all these other layers of, I guess at this point they're sort of top covering pieces of paper in a way. I almost treat them as sort of a landing pad for the moisture that collects on the plastic above. But then eventually it starts to get so tattered that the time comes that it just ends up being used more as a carbon food source rather than a bedding. And then it'll get mixed in with the foods and stuff and then get chomped away, eaten by the worms. So, all right, this is really quite nice. I was surprised to see so much moisture up on top right beneath the plastic, and then, you know, find relative dryness down within the feeding area. So that just goes to show that the moisture does like to kind of work its way up in an attempt to evaporate and get out of the container. So now I guess preservation of the existing moisture in here would be nice. I'm wondering if maybe some other piece of plastic to sort of supplement this outer edge. So maybe even though we're kind of losing a bunch of moisture with that gap between the bag and the tub outside of it, maybe we can help preserve some of the moisture down in here. I don't know. You know what? I think I am going to try that idea of just tucking the bag in right in here alongside the bag into the tub, and maybe we can do away with these little fruit flies. I just hate the idea that they're just going to go find another place to live, or they're just going to move in under the plastic, but it does seem like the zip top cover might be contributing to them feeling kind of cozy in here, so I'm going to try to work it down to the point where maybe I remove the appeal for them to keep moving back in. Alright everyone, that's it for the reunion. How did you like it? Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up. It's always really appreciated. If you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching.